Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Nower Darris. This is your host Mahmoud Nower. Today we'll be speaking about personality and identity and the various theories and the various stages we go through our lives. Make sure to stick by and let me know if you have any questions. Make sure to like and share and subscribe, and shall we get started? So we're gonna start with gender identity. With gender identity is also a very how would I say common topic in our current society, and how people identify with their gender is basically a person's own appraisal on the feminine and the masculine scale. So their own like perspective on where they are on the scale, and this is what gender identity is. And then you have androgyny. So androgyny is basically being both masculine and feminine, like having both traits of like masculinity and femininity. Then you have self-discrepancy theory. Self-discrepancy theory has like states that each one of us has three selves. All right, so the actual self is the way we see ourselves, the way we actually are. And then we have the ideal self is the person we'd like to be. Okay, and then the odd self is our representation of way others think we should be. All right, let me give an example. So actual self, for instance, let's say you're an introverted person on the inside where you like to stay and you don't like to go out. The ideal self, the person you actually want to be, you want to be a person that is outgoing, that goes out every day on adventures, that does a lot of things. Okay, and then our odd self is the representation of the way others think we should be. Maybe your family thinks you should go out more, they think you should participate in more stuff, and that's the representation they want to see of you. Next, we have self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is basically our own belief that we have the ability to succeed. It's like our self-motivation. It's like I have a high self-efficacy. I know I'm going to succeed in this MCAT, for instance. Next, we have locus of control. Refers to the way we characterize influences in our lives and in control of events. What kind of events can um, affect our lives? So we got two um, influences. We got internal influences, believe that they are in control, and then we got external influences that believe external factors are in control. Next, we have Freud's psychosexual development or libido. Alright, so we're gonna start with oral, which starts from like birth to 1 years old, and basically infant gets gratification through putting things in their mouth, playing with the block, putting it in their mouth, or with a toy or something, and that's how they get gratification. And then, which happens between 1 to 3 years, which is basically what people call it potty training or toilet training. And then we have phallic. So phallic is the sexual desire that the child feels toward the parent of the opposite sex and is jealous of the same sex. So for instance, boys will be more loving toward their mother than their dads, and girls will be loving more towards their dads than their moms during the 3 to 5 year age. And then boys attached with mom is known as the Oedipal stage, and girls compete with the mom for the dad's attention. It's known as the Electra conflict. So like I said, girls kind of like are jealous of the mom. They see them as a threat, and then the boys are attached. The boys are attached with their mom, and the girls see the mom as a threat, and they're attached with the dad. And then you got latency stage, which is 5 years old to puberty, in which libido will be inactive until puberty, and same-sex peers spend um, time together. You see sometimes how maybe in elementary school, you see boys just want to play with boys. Oh yeah, we think girls are disgusting, blah blah blah. All kids go through that stage. This is the latency stage. And then we got the genital stage, right, which is beyond puberty. So if the prior steps are taken, are healthy, the kid will enter into a heterosexual relationship, and then sexual interest begins and libido increases. Next, we have Erikson theory of psychosocial development and their virtues. Okay, so This explains what kind of psychosocial stages we go throughout different stages in our life. So we're going to start with trust versus mistrust, which happens from birth to 1 years old. So basically the baby is in a new environment and unsure of the environment. So the caretaker of the baby um, takes care and attends to the needs of the baby, and the baby learns to trust its environment. And if the caretaker fails for that, there will be mistrust. The baby will be confused about the environment. And then here, um, basically, the virtue that develops is hope. Hope develops here. Next, we have autonomy versus shame or doubt, which happens between 1 to 3 years old. Basically, the child explores the surrounding and develops new interests. But if the child is overly being controlled, it's like telling them specific stuff. Oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. You can't go here, you can't go that. Unless it's like for safety. Um, Doubt develops. So they don't have a sense of autonomy, they have more sense of doubt. And then here the virtue that it develops is will. If all is healthy, will develops. And then we have initiative versus guilt, 3 to 6 years old. And basically, um, here kids learn basic physics and complete tasks for a purpose. If guilt wins, child becomes overcome by fear. And then here, purpose develops. So it's initiative, it's kind of you're motivating them to do the tasks on their own, to help around in the house and stuff like that. But if they have guilt, right, they'll be overcome by fear. Next, we have the industry versus inferiority. So pre-adolescent self-awareness. If solved, the child is able to use intelligence in the world. But if inferiority wins, the child now has low self-esteem. So this is a really significant stage to developing self-esteem and giving them kind of a competency and kind of self-independence, really. And here competency develops. And then next is identification versus role confusion. So it's basically the independence to determine who they are and what's their role in society. They're still unsure about their role in society and what their kind of fidelity is. If negative, if they're confused, then they will be confused about the role, about their own identity. And here, like I said, fidelity develops. Next, we have intimacy versus isolation. It develops between 20 and 40 years. And here, people focus on creating long-term bonds with others. That includes intimacy, love, deep friendships, um, stuff like that. The favorable is intimate relationships. And then the unfavorable is self-isolation from others. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna find love, or I'm not gonna be able to develop bonds with anyone. And then here, love develops. Next, we have generativity versus stagnation. So if it's favorable, you're gonna have an individual who is productive, caring, and a contributing member of the society, loves to volunteer, loves to help everyone. And then if it's stagnation or unfavorable, you have a bored, self-centered person. And then here, the virtue that develops is care. Care develops if they are generative. Yeah. And then lastly, we have integrity versus despair, which is 65 to death. And then reflection and contemplative. So now you're in your kind of, retirement years, end years, and then you're kind of reflecting on how your life was. If favorable, we see wisdom and we see an individual who is able to share their experiences. But if not, and we see despair, we think one's life is worthless, or the person thinks his life is worthless. Next, we have zone of proximal development. So that describes skills that child hasn't developed and requires more knowledge for it. Um, Next, we have defense mechanisms. We have a lot of defense mechanisms to cover. All right. So, these are going to be a little bit hard to kind of memorize or keep in your mind, but try and basically understand these concepts by relating them to an example or maybe relating them to your real life everyday events. Okay, so we're going to start with the first defense mechanism, which is repression. So unconsciously removing an unwanted feeling or an idea from the conscious, or So for instance, a man survived 6 months in a concentration camp, but they can't remember anything after they come back, alright? So unconsciously, their mind is like deleted that footage. They're like, oh, I can remember where I was. I was just in a state that was unexplainable. Next, we have suppression, which is consciously removing the feeling or the idea from the conscious. For instance, a terminally ill cancer patient, you know, they're going through a lot. They put aside the anxiety and the fear they have to enjoy time with family. They put aside their feelings to enjoy time with family. Then we have regression. So regression is when faced with stress, returns to the previous development stage. So for instance, a husband and a wife are fighting, and then the husband speaks to a wife in a baby way when telling her like uh, maybe bad news, or like when fighting or something like that, or like let me give you another example. So a husband is approaching his wife, and then he has bad news, and he's like, oh baby, hey, hi, how you doing? um so I got some bad news, something like that. So this would be a way. And yeah, just kind of not in the most like adult way, or not at the stage they're in, for instance. Next, we have rationalization, which is this justification of behaviors, attitudes, or beliefs, even if they contradict the social norm. So for instance, a murderer who claims killing is wrong but justifies killing his victim because they deserve it, for instance. Next, we have displacement, so a transfer of undesired urge from one person to another. Let's say that you have a boss at work and they just keep stressing you, but you can't do anything because you need the job, right? So um, instead of screaming at your boss, you transfer and displace that to, for instance, your children or family members or your friends. Next, we have sublimation, so the transformation of unacceptable urges to socially accepted behavior. So for instance, if a boss is attracted to his employer, which because you're in a professional environment, you can't have that. So he becomes her mentor and advisor in order to be closer to her. And then we have projection, so basically denies a bad trait and project it to someone else. So let's say an individual has really bad anger issues, okay, and then they're in a kind of like a a I would say not a fight, but like a discussion or something like that, conversation, and they're threatened by their own angry feelings, okay? They don't want to seem like they're in the wrong, so they accuse the others of harboring hostile thoughts. They're like, oh yeah, I'm not always angry. You just hate me for no reason, or you just hate me because da 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 da, blah 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 blah. And then we got reaction formation, unwanted impulse transformed to opposite. So two coworkers fight because they're actually attracted to each other, or like when I don't know, look at your friend group, or like look at people in your school, and then you see a girl and a guy fight. They secretly, low key, have a reaction formation. They kind of are attracted to each other. Next, we have the Penn model, the three personality dimensions. We have psychotism, and then we have extravision, we have neurotism. So psychotism is the measure of one's conformity. Conformity is basically adjusting one's behavior to match the society or a group. And then extraversion is the measure of the tolerance of the social interactions, um, how much do you really want to stay out or interact with people. And then neurotism is the measure of the emotional arousal and the negative effect. So we have the big five personality traits. Openness is basically individual's willingness to try new things and think creative. You're open to trying new stuff. That's openness. And then you got extravision, like I said, social interaction and enjoying being the center of attention. What's the measure of that? Next, we have neuroticism, which is this trait reflects the individual's tendency to experience negative emotions such as anxiety, fear, or sadness. And then agreeableness is basically this trait refers to an individual's tendency to be cooperative, empathetic, and kind to others. And then lastly, consciousness, which is basically the individual's level of organization, discipline, and responsibility. Next, we have Caller's moral reasoning. As our cognitive abilities grow, we're able to think about work in a more complex way. There are three stages to Callagher morals, which is pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional. So PCP, if that's an easy way for you to memorize it. So pre-conventional is pre-adolescence, places an emphasis on consequences of like moral choice. So you're faced with moral choices and you want to avoid punishment through obedience and you want to get a reward, right? That's what you're interested in, the reward. And then we have the conventional morality, the adolescence through adulthood, okay? You accept the social rules, you want to avoid trouble, you want to abide by the rules and maintain social orders. And then conformity, you also want to fit in with people and you want to kind of adjust your attitude or behaviors to the society. And then post-conventional is adulthood, so reasoning based on social morals. They developed social morals and then now they compare it and see it and use it in the society. So social contract views morals as a good thing, right? And then universal human ethics is reasons that decisions should be made in the consideration of abstract principles. For instance, universal human ethics, killing is a bad thing, stealing is a bad thing. That's the kind of the post-conventional morality, universal human ethics. Next we have persona. So persona is the aspect of our personality we present the world. Maybe you have a big part of your persona you represent to the society, but you keep a secret part of you inside of you in, because maybe it's not socially accepted. And then you have anima. Anima is basically a feminine traits trapped is wait, what? Anima is like feminine and it's suppressed man behavior in women. So anima relates to like for instance, I don't know, I would say women's love for uh, hmm, certain men behavior. I don't know, maybe go and shoot a gun for instance, or hunt. Okay. And then animus is masculine and it's suppressed feminine side in men. Maybe I don't know, suppressed feminine side is maybe like in the color pink, I would say, or um, being more engaged in like feminine activities. Jung describes three dichotomies. Dichotomies are contrasts of personalities. So you got three dichotomies, three contrasts. Extroversion versus introversion, that's self-explanatory. Sensing versus intuition, obtaining objective info about the world versus intuition, working abstractly with the information. And sensing is basically based on knowledge, intuition based on like your own sense. And then thinking using logic versus using personal beliefs or feelings. So logic versus feelings, sensing versus intuition, extroversion versus introversion. That's basically uh, Jung or Young. Inferiority complex is when an individual senses incompleteness and imperfection and inferiority. They feel like they're lower than other people. Fictional finalism is the individual is motivated by his expectation of the future. Okay, fictional finalism. All right, for example, I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna open clinics. I'm gonna work in the hospital. I'm gonna save thousands of patients. I'm gonna make a lot of money, for instance. That's fictional finalism. I'm motivated by my expectations. And then you got humanistic theories, focuses on a value of the individual as they strive through self-realization. And then Gestalt therapy helps the people take a holistic view of themselves, of what's happening in the present. So Gestalt therapy kind of sits them down and then holistic view of how your life is going, how your relationships are, how's your social life, how's your work, stuff like that. And then we have Allport three traits. We got cardinal dominant traits that shape the person's life, central traits that are general characteristics of an individual, and secondary traits that are more personal characteristics. So that wraps up for identity and personalization. Hopefully you found it intriguing and helpful. And till next time, and have a blessed day.